Thank you all for joining Black Revolutionary Theater Workshops, November 2021, Melanated Monday. This month's theme is Miseducation. BRTW stands for Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop. We exist to disrupt any and all oppressive systems that impact Black folks. We use narrative and performance as a methodology to recenter Black experiences and identities. And with economic, social, educational, healthcare, housing, and political injustice disproportionately facing our community, BRTW aims to tackle the issues that impact us while becoming a beacon for Black opportunity within the arts. And one of the ways that we fulfill that mission is via the very program that you're tuning into right now. Melanated Mondays is a monthly variety show, a writing and performance salon, where we feature works by Black writers, performed by Black performers, emceed by my very Black self, HH. And we are so very grateful to have these wonderful creatives with us this evening. Virgil Gavia and Tim Craig are not only kick-ass amazing writers, performers, producers, they are a part of the very engine of Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop. This company would not be without them. This event would not be without them. This, however you are accessing this, would not be a thing without them. So I'm very deeply grateful for their time and their energies and their talents. We also have Kira DeCoudre, who you will not see because she is kind of like the magic behind the scenes, making the live stream run. And of course, our wonderful performers who you will see, Donnell Cole Price, who I think if we had an award for like most consistent player, it would be Donnell Cole Price. I can't think of a Melanated Monday that Donnell has missed. And honestly, I pity the fool that thinks that Donnell's not going to show up. Like, as a phrase that we grew up with a lot that isn't a real word is like stick-to-itiveness. And I think Donnell Cole Price takes the stick-to-itiveness Melanated Monday award. That is not to say that we love y'all any less. Akemini and Xander are also series regulars. You see them so frequently, and we're always so thankful to have them. Akemini Ekpo and Xander Jackson are also performers this evening. And we have a couple of pieces, the first of which is an excerpt from a play I was so privileged to co-write with Virgil Gavia called After Swarm that premiered in 2018. I know yours. I started that sentence so strong and ended it so wrong, and I am so sorry.
2019? I think it was 2019.
2019.
January 2019, I'm pretty sure.
That's like 2018 Step Cousin. It premiered before the pandemic in New York City, and thank you all for bearing with me as I realized that I didn't know my own resume. And the following piece this evening, the last piece of the evening, is by Equiano. I don't want to mess this up. Equiano Mazzieri, who is a newcomer to Melanated Mondays, but I love this work. I think you all are going to love this work, and I hope that this is the first of many pieces that he shares with us. And with that, I will turn it over to Donnell Cole Price, who will introduce the next scene.
After Swarm, scene 7.5 by H. Harvey and Virgil Gavia. Cast: Evil, read by Virgil Gavia. Colton, read by Xander Jackson. Gigi, read by Ikemiti Ekpo. Stage directions, read by Donnell Cole Price. Eva enters and begins hanging tapestries, purposefully placing one directly in Gigi's garden. Colton enters.
This looks magical.
It felt like time to take the space back.
I'm surprised it didn't feel like time before.
I've had my hands full.
I'd say so. The 3
Essence.
is eager, but undisciplined.
I'm working with her.
And the 5
Cheetah.
is off.
Off?
I don't like how he looks at me.
How does he look at you?
Like he's got questions.
He wants to learn from Big Brother. Can't fault him for that.
And designs.
I'll talk to him.
See that you do.
And what's occupying your time? I'm serious.
I'm the glue that holds all of this together.
Well, maybe the glue can pick up a hammer and fix the roof.
I forgive you for that. You've been through so much. I need to remember that. I can't imagine.
You can't?
They exchange a look. They don't see Gigi enter until
Oh, hell with this.
Georgia rips down the tapestry in the garden. Colton begins to step forward.
You're the glue, remember? I'll handle this.
You'll handle me? I've been kind enough to shelter what's left of your brainwashed cult, and
Georgia throws the tapestry to the ground.
Be careful with that.
fuck you. You can chant naked and bay at the moon for all I care, but you can't just waltz in and cover my garden in your nest head nonsense.
Are you done?
Don't patronize me.
Wouldn't dream of it. In fact, I'm prepared to take that tapestry, fold it up, and make sure nests and all of its trappings stay out of your garden. How does that sound?
It's the least you can do.
Fair. Why don't you sit down? I'll be honest with you, Gigi. You seem stressed.
And I'm sure you can't imagine why.
I want to help, if I can.
By converting me?
The nest is not a faith, Gigi. Besides, you helped me through my first few days here. Can I return the favor?
I dragged you out of the freezing cold and dressed your wounds. I even kept your sidekick from killing you. What are you offering me?
Catharsis. Seriously, let's hang out. You vent, I listen.
Yeah,
That's the deal. Like, what's your name? Simple enough, right? Tell me your name. Tell me your name.
Gigi.
Here. Again. Tell me your name.
Georgia Christine Breyer.
Good. Now your profession?
Ecology.
Tell me again.
Ecology. Entomology, specifically bee cultures, conservation, and repopulation. Look, what is this?
Here. Again. Tell me your name.
Dr. Georgia Christine Breyer.
Doctor of what?
Ecology.
Tell me your profession.
Entomology.
Tell me what you do.
I keep bees.
Again, tell me what you do.
I study bees. Try to restore their colonies in urban environments.
Why does that matter?
To the study of bees, I like to think that I'm restoring balance.
Tell me why that matters.
It saves entire ecosystems.
Don't break eye contact with me.
Bees are critical to the balance of the world as we know it. Our produce, our,
Tell me one person your work has saved.
well, it's not like that, but
One name.
Georgia Christine Breyer.
So you saved yourself. Good. Tell me how. Don't freeze up on me now, Gigi. You're so close. Tell me how you saved yourself.
Everything was so broken. I ran. There wasn't anything left, so I came here.
Tell me what you did.
I did my work.
But it's not your work, is it?
No.
Tell me what you do, Georgia. Tell me why it matters. Tell me how bees are saving the world. Tell me why that garden matters. Tell me what you do.
I don't do anything anymore. Fine. You're right. I don't have a job. I did. And it was the only thing I had to show for my entire life. I was always in a classroom or a lab. Friends and family always just disappeared. I didn't even have a cat, but I had my research and I had my bees. I was respected, published, decently paid. And then the nest. First, you were posting memes and pithy sayings. You even shared a few. Office gossip, lunch talk. I seemed woke to be curious. But then you were protesting and then writing and talking about violence against the police, violence against citizens. And I looked untrustworthy. And my casual interest made me a target. Do you know how many Black women are in those labs? I was a scientist, empirical, not political, and you people politicized me right out of a fucking career. You know, I'm the only person to be fired for a violation of the social media policy 2 years after the original post. So suddenly I'm out of a job. And so are thousands of Black people, mind you. But Nest forges ahead, destabilizing everything in its path. And racism didn't do that. The man didn't take my job. You people left me with a fortune's worth of debt and an abandoned island to fix my reputation. And then you fucking lost? Where is the Black utopia I paid for with my life's work? Where is it? You fucking bitch.
I don't think that's called for.
What is this? What are you trying to do?
I told you.
Everything's a manipulation with you people.
Gigi, why don't you sit back down?
What the fuck is this?
Just an opportunity to clear the air. Catharsis. I'm glad to know you better, Gigi.
Get the fuck away from me.
Eva begins to leave. Then
Almost forgot.
she takes the tapestry.
A promise is a promise.
She exits. End of scene.
Thank you to our wonderful performers. That was Miyako Gavia, Xander Jackson, Ekemini Ekpo, and Donnell Cole Price. Thank you all so much for your beautiful work. Our next piece, again, is by a writer who's new to Melanated Mondays, and we're always so excited to have new content. If you happen to be a Black writer watching this, and you're like, man, I always wanted to share a piece of mine and get paid for it, hit us up at admin@thebrtw.org. We would be very happy to pay you for your labor. This next piece is by Equiano Mazzieri, and I will turn it over to Donnell Cole Price to finish the introduction.
7 times told by Equiano Mazzieri. A. Xander Jackson. E. Miyako Gavia. Stage directions, Donnell Cole Price. Life. Setting, a cemetery. Time, late at night. Audience faces a part of the cemetery where the immediate horizon seems closer than normal. The eyebrow of the cemetery is arching and looming, almost a hill, but not quite so. A quiet clacking of 2 pairs of shoes upon concrete is heard. Coming over the eyebrow are 2 silhouettes, both slender, one a bit taller than the other. They approach the audience with benevolence and malevolence that appears at once familiar. They stop halfway between the audience and the eyebrow, and without words, begin to limn each other's face. With utmost care and almost narcissistic obsession, both motionless, the clacking sounds of the shoes continues, slowly increasing in volume and gradually slowing in sound and tempo until the sound resembles a heartbeat. The sound stops.
Should we tell them?
A laughter breaks from the odd opposite as the opposite takes in the laughter that seems to have consumed and turned him into a half man. Half howling monkey and Cucaraga hybrid. Equiano turns to the audience. He smiles, which sets off more laughter, this time from many persons around the graveyard. The laughs feel as though they come from all around the cemetery. Akil has since stopped laughing. His left lapel turns up and seems to have mud on the tip of it.
Should we tell her?
Should we tell him?
moving with intensity towards in the audience.
Do you want to know?
You might know the truth, but the truth will make you insane.
Calm down. I'm going to make a new prophet of this one.
You make him a prophet and he's proved wrong. That's the most disturbing thing to accept as a prophet.
Yes, but you'll be right no matter what. And being proven right is only the second most disturbing thing.
His constituency couldn't take it. No offense, good man. That truth will kill the cancer of lies within him and the host of the disease. Chemotherapy isn't for everyone. Leave him alone so he can have another day to pleasure himself. At least leave him that.
Maybe we should tell you.
Maybe, since you have all the answers, you should tell us.
Yes, tell us the answer to this question, please, because it has been bothering me for ages. Who is in charge of all of this brilliance? And what a spectacle.
Why even ask that question? A finer one can be presented. What are your plans right after this?
Yes, plans. Fucking,
Teaching,
tucking,
preaching,
watching,
touching,
talking,
walking,
eating, beating, freeing, peeing,
Cooked up and spit on ground.
shitting,
spitting,
splitting,
quipping, whipping, writing,
wiping, laughing,
crying.
spying, stalking, mocking, blocking, driving, depriving.
As these words are said, bodies are seen illuminating the images cast by these words.
Punching,
Gulping,
gulping, thirsting,
thirsting,
working, jerking, twerking, flirting, schadenfreude, hoarding.
A body stands over a grave, points what appears to be a gun and fires. The sound is haunting and echoes once.
lording.
Lording, that's a good one.
Seriously, what are the plans? I love this question. Everyone says the same things. Verbs, nothing but verbs of action, movement, every single one of them. None of you is different.
Which is fantastic.
Beautiful, really is, but for the fact that none of you, well,
Okay, come on, should we tell them?
I seriously doubt it would make any difference to them.
But what if it did? What if the divulgence of this information, this fogginess was lifted and the magician's technique was finally shared?
What would happen then?
I haven't a fucking clue, but I am very much intrigued.
Before, revealing my face meant that I had to make the person vanish.
Vanish, yes, or die.
Die. No. Transition onto the earth, or whatever superstition rocks their midsections these days. Are your hips open?
Marichayasana,
Come downward, dogs.
return to stardust.
Whatever. I love it.
But the idea of that is so
boring.
perfect. It is so damn boring. And pure, too. Boredom makes for the festering of an impossible genital wart that grows into your brain.
Sounds very painful.
Not as much as you'd think, though the stench is a painful part. And that pain reminds me of the shitstorm that they've caused by all this boredom.
You think they grew bored of themselves?
The idea of nails on a chalkboard threatens their ivory ideals. You think they would allow themselves to admit that they have grown bored of themselves? Admit they are the pain they cause? No.
I see.
When the thought of a utopia is possible, I thought boredom would be more painful than agreeable. But then you have to understand that boredom is a sort of liberty or paradise for them.
Yes, the closer you get to them, you feel like changing something.
Really? I don't ever want you to change.
Noise off in the distance, maybe the sound of the church shoes clacking against concrete, maybe the knocking of wood which continues for a while.
So, what do you want me to do about it?
What? Them? There is nothing you can do now.
Kill them?
That's not fair.
Why not? Somebody's got to do it.
It solves nothing. And plus, that's the same base thing we always want. And thirdly, it may be boring, but it's fucking hilarious.
Oh, I agree. But it would be funnier if I killed them.
You participate in a tragedy, love. At comedy, we only look. Try something different.
Torture.
Too indifferent.
Manipulation.
Okay.
As in free will.
I thought that was already a thing, dear.
So did I. But when you deal with an army of more and more people that don't believe in you, you have to reinstitute some of the good old grain.
Out with the old and with the old? I don't see the point.
Think about it. We don't have free will.
They do.
They actually do.
If they did not, they would not have the ability to doubt or second guess.
Okay.
If we take away the thought of those without free will, a god or a devil, demons, angels, or similar ideas we share, then free will, according to the old philosophies, never existed. And if free will never exists, then people are doing what people have no choice but to do, which removes all the guilt I ever felt about anything they have ever done, like
Rape,
poverty,
racism,
infanticide,
femicide,
war.
homicide.
I covered all the types of murder with just saying war.
I know. The sound of the sides does something for me. Also, no free will removes any idea of actually having to manipulate to gain access to a source they don't need.
Elaborate on source.
Soul.
But if we are talking free will, but never mind, it sounds complicated.
It's not. It's a dance with the devil sort of theme.
Then it sounds easily shaken off.
It's a prototype.
Oh, great, another Stone Age prototype. There's the problem right there. Prototypes don't always work, especially Stone Age ones. Hush for a moment.
Are you doubting yourself? Not a great trait, my friend.
I said hush.
Regain your prior arrogance. It suits you better. Plus, nobody laughs as madly as you do, and then toys with mawkish, pensive moments.
Shut up, you maggot, and let me know for a moment without your cacophony of words. Okay, what you're saying is, tell them they have free will as it has been stated for the past 1,000+ years.
Yes.
And because this is a belief many of the non-believers already share, that will then tear them apart because it slightly agrees with what you and I stand for, but
He starts to smile.
There it is, the face of recognition.
The knocking of the wood stops.
More than
Smile
that.
disappears.
recognition of a miscalculation.
Finally.
Shouldn't have been so neurotic. Why would I make them neurotic? Senseless act that it was. Now they're just an intelligence that are slaves to their organs.
And desires.
Sexual.
And cruel.
My dear old friend, my blame is gone forever. No point waiting for calls. No point proving your worth anymore. No more self-doubt. No more.
Even a genius has his questions.
Even a madman has his answers. You want the earth to fall into peace? You have to first see the earth falls to pieces. And finally, my two souls sleep peacefully.
I'm tired of this fame. Everyone knows your faces, everyone knows your names, and never again are you alone. I've taken so many people on wild rides in life, and so have you. I've been there with people in asylums before death as they've been born, been there even when they were a glint in their great grandparents' eyes. I've been blamed for things I did, which I think is great. I've even been called to help when it was you who wanted to help more.
I've heard you say some incredible stories and lay some ridiculous claims, but never did I believe fame was something you sought after. You sound like a pitiful, used and abused whore, and I mean that kindly. Look, I pay no attention to anyone's blames or praises. I simply follow my own feelings. Remember, free will isn't in us.
But, fuck.
What?
It will never end. Same shit, different generation.
Well, that's what we wanted. So let's at least see it through to the next generation, my friend.
Have you ever stopped to think all this carnage we've seen, all this fall from grace, fall from trees and windows, falling out of opinions, falling for falsities, this falling. Have you ever stopped to think?
No.
Play the game.
E shows he would be silent for A to continue.
Why do some of them have rules that makes them old enough to go to war, but not old enough to drink?
Or fuck.
Or fuck.
Fuck knows why. My job is to create the images. I leave the decision-making and conclusion drawing to others. You should try some of the same. Play some music instead of indulging in meretricious pleasures.
That's twice you've lowered me to a whore. I could destroy you.
You could, but why bother? I could do it myself.
Your weakness has ruined me.
Well, maybe that's my strength over you. Anyway, I think it is time to leave for a while. Stay if you must, my dear, but don't make yourself cheap here. That is the real point of my meeting you again. Finally, in front of them. If you become cheap, you are done.
I'm being polite. Plus, my motive is ulterior.
Impertinence has the best chance of survival, and love. Act not in politesse.
Wild laughter from the distance. They both look at each other as though the laugh was shared between them.
I love you.
Don't we all?
Points to Akil's lapel, which has been turned up and dirty this whole time.
You have something.
Akil fixes lapel and scratches off dried mud. As they walk towards the audience, they say at the same time,
Details.
Cleanliness.
They walk into the audience/crowd, get into the middle of the gathering and stop. They look into the eyes of each spectator. They each touch the face of one of them.
Should we tell them?
I never tell 8 times.
A loud crash is heard behind the audience. Then the two talkers run in opposite directions, but over the immediate horizon of the cemetery. Death.
Thank you to our wonderful performers. And before we switch gears, we do have a handful of announcements before we get to our community conversation. So I just want to repeat again, thank you to Virgil Gavia, Xander Jackson, Donnell Cole Price, and Equiano Mazieri for this lovely work. As you all know, tonight's theme is Miseducation. We have a wonderful guest speaker coming in, Virgil Gavia, who has been in education for the entirety of his career as a teacher, assistant principal, adjunct professor, project coordinator, diagnostic substance abuse counselor, and we can't wait to get into the community conversation with him. But before we do that, we have a handful of just like housekeeping updates that I'm probably going to need a phone a friend to remember all of. One would think I would add this to the script. We've only been doing this for several years. No, I'll be strong and wrong until I die. Please support BRTW on our website while we make sure that all of our programs and offerings are free or as free as we can manage to make them as a means of accessibility. That doesn't mean that they're free to produce. And it's certainly not free to pay Black creatives for their wonderful work. So if you can support us, you can go to our website, thebrtw.org. On the support page, you can make a donation via PayPal or Fractured Atlas, whatever is your preference. Both platforms accept donations that are monthly recurring donations. And I do want to just share a special shout out to all of our monthly recurring donors. It's just really great to know that on, a certain day every month, at least the lights won't go out. That is such a safety net that many organizations do not have, and it is one of the most powerful ways that you can support organizations. If you don't have money, hey, neither do I. But there are other ways to support this organization. You can support us by following us online on Instagram or Twitter at the BRTW. You can also follow us on Facebook if you still have that, or Meta, which isn't creepy at all. Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop. You can also check out our website, thebrtw.org. And if you are or know a Black artist who is looking for work, by all means, shoot your shot. If you're an actor, send an email to admin@thebrtw.org with your headshot and your reel. It doesn't really matter if you have 1 million credits on your resume. We know it be like that sometimes. So we will audition you. We want to make sure that, like, you know, listening and speaking and Stanislavski and all of that great stuff, and can take direction. But if you're out here and you're looking for work, that's why BRTW exists. We want to help you if we can. People have hit us up via our email out of nowhere, and they've ended up in podcasts. They've ended up in Melanated Mondays. They've ended up in shows, and we want to keep doing that. If you are a writer, we have Writer's Block, which is a free workshop that is every second and fourth Tuesday of each month, where you can do prompts and writing sprints and other exercises facilitated by Heide Souffrant, who, in addition to just being an amazing, wonderful individual, is basically sharing the, you know, several $1,000s of an MFA writing program with you for free. So feel free to join Writer's Block and work on a new project, work on an old project, edit a project, do whatever you want. It's for writers from every background. You can also apply to Melanated Mondays to have your work included here. We do pay all writers whose work is included. You unfortunately cannot apply to Revolution Now anymore. We closed that application. We are going to be sending out emails this week. So if you did apply to Revolution Now, check your inbox. You might have some good news coming your way. A few people have some good news coming their way. And just a reminder for anyone who's forgotten about Revolution Now, that is a program that pays participating writers $250, gives them free production support, script development, audio production, direction. The final Melanated Monday of every year is dedicated just to Revolution Now writers, and we also produce their works professionally on our podcast, Black Revolutionary Media. Miyako, Tim, what have I forgotten?
We are on Patreon, patreon.com/thebrtw. And don't forget to check out, did you talk about our podcast?
Abstractly, not enough.
Yeah, we have a podcast, Black Revolutionary Media, where we are currently airing stuff from our archive, as well as things from the past Revolution Now cohort. And we will be airing things from the new Revolution Now cohort sometime in 2022. So check back there.
Anything else, Tim?
I think that about covers it all. I want to quickly say, of course, thank you to all these lovely, talented actors that are up on these boxes with us. That is something I want to add in addition to all of our promoting. If you are watching this, these are some of the most talented actors in the country, out of the country, in the city of New York. All of these names that you're seeing in front of you, you will be seeing more and more often. So if you are a producer, director, writer, and you want to find some actual talent, please email us at admin@brtw.org or head to our website, and we can connect you directly to all of these talented people that are continuing to consistently share their talents with us. That's the only thing I really have to add. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Tim. That is such a great reminder to put out there. People have reached out to us before looking for Black actors. I guess when you Google Black theater, we come up. But yeah, we are happy to connect you to good folks as long as it seems like you're going to treat them well. And with that, we're going to transition to our community conversation. I am going to read through a very fancy bio, and we're going to introduce Mr. Virgil Gavia. Virgil Gavia graduated from Indiana University in 1975 with a degree in health, physical education, and recreation, grades K through 12, received a master's degree from Indiana Wesleyan in 2006 with a degree in curriculum and instruction for K-12. He got his administrative license for K-12 at Indiana University and also studied at the School of Tropical Health and Wellness in London in 1982. He began teaching at Indianapolis Public Schools in 1975 and has been in education for 40 years. Mr. Gavia has taught in urban schools, charter schools, and township schools and has been an adjunct professor at Martin University. He says his most important job he's ever done is being a dad. Yeah, you might have some name recognition there. Miyako Gabia, one of the producers, writers, and performers of BRTW, is Mr. Gavia's daughter. And the reason why I feel very uncomfortable saying his first name, in my mind, you'll always be Mr. Gavia. But it's lovely to see you again. How are you?
Yeah, I am well, and it's so good to see you, Heather, and Miyako, and the rest of you. I am, man, I am overblown by all this talent and all this energy, and you guys get it. You get it. Go for it. Knock it out and keep swinging. Whether you miss or not, keep swinging. Anyway, happy to be here.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to have you. As you may know, our usual format is we have some questions that we mostly gear towards our community speaker, you, our guest of honor. And then we also welcome the floor to our wonderful actors who can stay on and participate in the community conversation to whatever extent they would like to. And then at the end of it, if there are any kind of like action items you'd like to share, tips for civic engagement, you are more than welcome to. And usually we also say, if you have any pluggables, feel free to share those because we have a lot of like creative types on here. But if you have a pluggable, if you want to share your Insta with everyone, you're more than welcome to do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. All right, let's get into this community conversation. So the first thing up in this evening's agenda is probably something we've all seen in the news. Recent controversies surrounding American K-12 curricula have highlighted the fact that a disproportionately vocal contingency of, let's be real, largely conservative parents confuse well-known, if poorly understood, theoretical frameworks with content appropriate for K-12 curricula. And what we're mostly seeing here are people shouting about CRT, critical race theory, intersectionality, and socialism. So the question is, to what extent are these subjects actually even taught in K-12 curricula, and why?
Well, first of all, curricula in each state is different. Curricula is based on state standards, and each state set its own standards for what is taught and how it's taught in some cases. So, as well as its matriculation, in other words, how it moves up the grading scale. So what is taught in math for third grade, obviously is going to be different than fourth grade, than eighth grade, than 10th grade. So, but each state has complete control over that. And specifically when it comes to what is covered and not covered in certain states, for instance, in Texas, when they talk about the Alamo, the information covered in the Alamo in Texas is quite different than the information covered in Indiana about the Alamo. And so each state has its own responsibility for making sure that those standards are set and met. What is taught in this state, though, socialism is taught in this state, but it's taught in government classes, and it's taught as a defined idea or concept, along with things like capitalism, fascism, communism, dictatorship, egalitarianism. So it's not something that's taught with the idea of indoctrinating people to think a certain way or to act a certain way, only to give people information so they can understand as they read on, as they get into discussions, what these things mean and how they've been used in the past.
Thank you for that.
Okay, is anything else?
Yeah, thank you for that.
Mhm.
What social justice content actually can be found in K-12 curricula?
None. None. Social justice, as I look at it as an educator, is equal access to wealth and opportunity and privilege within a society. But in K-12, we don't teach students to make a value placement on that. We just talk about what happened, how it happened, and the results of that. It's up to that student and subsequently the people in their environment to discuss that, to break it down, to massage it, and then to come up with, how do I feel about it? What do I want to do about it? How does it impact me? How does it impact the people that I care about? So beyond just giving the information and framing the context, that's as far as you can go as an educator. Because to do any more, you cease to become an educator, and then you find yourself in the realm of being an influencer, a dictator, a person who tells you how to think, and that's not what a teacher does.
Thank you so much for that.
Mhm.
And I actually want to allow some space for our performers to respond here, because one of the beautiful things about doing this virtually, and just one of the beautiful things about working with Black professionals in New York City, is that y'all come from all over. And so I know my first exposure to critical race theory was when I was pursuing a degree in Africana studies. It's like a field of study where critical race theory is relevant. Similarly, intersectionality, that's something I was exposed to in college. And as Mr. Gavia broke down really effectively, I only learned about socialism in K-12 curricula by means of history, social studies, history, government. And it was very much so, here are some models of government in a very kind of bullet point fashion. No kind of insight into the theoretical frameworks or, the history of like socialism in, Eastern Europe versus like Black socialist movements that came out of the West Indies. There was none of that kind of intricacy. So for y'all, were you exposed to any of these social justice frameworks that people are so up in arms about while you were in K-12?
For me, it was really more like the most radical we really got. I use radical in like air quotes, was, in elementary school, we learned about the civil rights movement and Dr. Martin Luther King. And so like right around Dr. Martin Luther King Day, we would have a big parade. And so everybody would make signs, and we would like march around the school with our signs promoting like justice and friendship and all those good stuff. And we would sing "We Shall Overcome," and it would end in this big thing in the auditorium where we like had things about like, don't be racist, being racist is bad. And like being friends with the other kids. And so that was really the most like radical that we got. So we did that, and we would like, I went to a Montessori school, so we would like teaching peace. So it was like learning about peace and peace with other cultures and peace with other people. And that really shouldn't be radical, but I think some people would consider it just like, oh my gosh, some really horrible indoctrination to be taught that racism is bad and people should be friends with each other.
Anybody else got exposed to the radical core concepts of friendship and peace in K-12 education?
I would say that, just mirroring what Miyako said, is that going through K through 12, just learning about history and social studies, learned about the civil rights movement. And I mean, it depends on how you frame the term social justice, because we learned about the American Revolution and like independence from Great Britain and how they went about that, and it was more factual instead of indoctrinating. And I'd only learned about critical race theory when I went to college, so briefly. I learned more about like intersectionality, and it was only in a study of I'm blanking on the actual course, but it dealt with Caribbean and West Indian slavery in particular, and that history and how that relates to Caribbean American studies and those issues, and how like everything is interconnected, and learning about like the social constructs of everything, and how it's so like ingrained in the social structure, but none of that was specifically touched on in K through 12. So just hearing about all of these up in arms social justice issues is quite frankly confusing, and because it was like Virgil Gavia mentioned that there really isn't much of any, and I can't remember it ever being touched upon, even in like passing, in like a little passage underneath a caption of like, oh, then this thing exists.
Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to the next question, but
That's my younger sister who keeps peeking in. Hi, Hanako.
Sorry, I'm being technical support.
If I might add a caveat to that, for about 20 years, I was involved in equity in our township, at Lawrence Township. There was a move on, started back in the 90s, where we were moving toward a more equitable representation from teachers and students in terms of our building, our classroom instruction, and all of that. One of the things that happened was we were starting to get involved in this whole idea of equity and social justice, but it was a conversation that evolved, and it took years and years and years to get to a point where we could have an open discussion like this. This wasn't something that happened overnight. It was fostered, it was seeded, it was watered, and it took time and time and time before we were able to sit down in a room and we're 40, 50-year-old adults with advanced degrees, and we had to learn how to talk to each other. Now, can you imagine trying to have this conversation with third graders and fourth graders, or 10th graders and 12th graders? It can't happen. So just the common sense of trying to apply these principles in an elementary or a middle school or a high school environment, it's utterly asinine. So, just the logic and the concept of trying to do something like this in K-12 education, it goes beyond comprehension. Anyway, that was my piece.
thank you so much for adding that. And I think that kind of leads us into the next question, which is that these conservative talking points are jarring, and especially in the light that there has been a history of allowing misinformation in American classrooms, particularly in regard to teaching American history. And I mean, it wasn't too long ago that Texas and other southern states fought to teach the history of chattel slavery by referring to enslaved Africans as workers, which automatically bakes in the assumption that their labor was not exploited, but that they were paid. So what is the actual threat of miseducation in K-12 classrooms?
Oh my goodness. It's multiple. First of all, Heather, I get what you're saying when you use the term misinformation, but it's more disinformation. This is a purposeful act of telling people not only half truths, but lies. And that's my greatest concern. Misinformation, you might be a little fuzzy on the facts here. You might get a date wrong here or there. There may be some room there for negotiation on what you're seeing here. And so much of that's value-based. I get that, but it's the different disinformation. And that disinformation, what that creates, for one thing, is once they find out that you're lying, they'll never believe you. Why should I trust you, anything that you say, if you can't tell me the truth about what's right in front of me? Again, it goes beyond logic. So that's the big thing. You're going to lose your audience. The other thing is this: if a teacher or an educator is pushed to use this disinformation, they will leave the profession, and that's also happened because there was this push on. This is a little different sidelight. There was this push on back in the 80s. In Indiana. I'll speak specifically of Indiana, where teachers were starting to be demonized. Teachers were being, people were being told, families and just the general public were being told that teachers were a problem. We were not, we were all in it for ourselves. We're all in it for the money. All in it for the money. And that the most important part of your education was not the classroom, but Capitol Hill, and that these people were going to protect you. There was a time, there was something that happened once where I went to a graduation ceremony, high school graduation ceremony, and there was a state legislator speaking to these high school graduates and the parents and all the visitors. And the one thing that he said that just absolutely floored me was that he was there to protect them from their teachers. Yeah. So this whole idea of disinformation and misinformation to gain leverage, this has been around for a long, long time. And it's been propagated by the same group over and over and over again. And for one reason and one reason only, and that is to get votes. And they want the votes so they can retain their power.
Thank you so much for that excellent point. I want to turn the floor over. Again, reflecting on your own K-12 experiences, did you have later realizations that you were in fact taught misinformation or disinformation? I know from my experience, I was introduced to Malcolm X as if he was, on some like philosophical binary from Martin Luther King that stood for like violence when like the question of pacifism was available, and it was just like this equal kind of like playing ground, as if they were always just butting heads. Like if Malcolm X caught Martin Luther King in the street, it was going to be a scrap. And it wasn't until I was in college that I realized that like many of their ideas very much so circled and complemented each other's, and that it was not this extreme as if Malcolm X didn't also stand for equity and justice and liberation. So what were some examples, if you have any, of misinformation or disinformation that you were exposed to in K-12?
Oh, go ahead.
I think that coming from Texas, I don't know what it's like in other states, but Texas history is its own thing that's taught very heavily alongside American history. I don't know if other states do that to the same degree, and I think it's because for a period of about 9 years, from 8, and I know these dates because of how they were just really emphasized. From 1836 and 1845, Texas was its own independent country, and so when we were taught Texas history, like it was a lot about the idea that Texas wanted to liberate itself from Mexico, and that like Texans are almost like the patriots of patriots, like with an extreme sense of independence. And I think kind of similarly to how the Civil War is taught over as a question of states' rights, Texan independence is the fact that Texans wanted independence from Mexico because they wanted to retain the practice of slavery was very much erased from the conversations about Texan independence and in the first half of the 19th century for me.
I remember in government class, I generally liked my government class. I thought that he was a very good teacher, but I remember at the beginning of the year, he did this thing where he was like, here's how I'm going to grade you, and I'm going to grade you based on what system of governance you want. Do you want a capitalist grading system, or do you want a communist grading system? And so the capitalist grading system was, so you get the grade you get, everybody gets their own individual grade. And you stand by it. And the communist grading system was everybody's grades go into one big pot and you come out with the average of all grades. So somebody in the class, and our teacher emphasized to us that if somebody in the class doesn't do their work, it's going to drag down your grade and you're all stuck with one grade. So at the very beginning of the year, he was like, what grading system do you want? And everybody chose capitalism. And he was like, see? And so, I didn't really learn, like all the stuff I learned about like communism and socialism was very much like about long bread lines and, Russia and about like this history of oppression as opposed to America, which is the ultimate freedom land. And I didn't really learn a lot of other perspectives until college.
I just want to like bang my head up against a wall. Like the idea of a capitalist grading system being anything other than finite access to A's that are only reserved for 10% of students. And they're all people who've been like disproportionately made accessible to these students because their parents had A's and their grandparents had A's and their great-great-grandparents had A's because their great-great-great-great-great-grandparents stole A's from everybody else. All right, I'm going to change the subject. Education. Go ahead, Tim.
No, I'm just going to piggyback a little bit off of what Miyako was saying. I think I didn't really kind of grasp until maybe about 11th, 12th grade. I think I grew up in the town of Birmingham, and Birmingham is always called Birmingham. It's always a revolutionary place. It's just the place it is. It's just kind of a ground for revolution, particularly because of its history. I want to ground this in the Civil Rights Act because we as Birminghamians always feel like because of the events that took place in the town, helped towards, a lot of events, but helped towards getting that legislation passed. But in true Birminghamian history, I went to a high school that had the highest property taxes in the state of Alabama. So I think with my awareness, I was able to pick up on how I was being taught, particularly in classes of government, because I would go back across town and there would be a different story and a different understanding of how these historic events kind of transpired. And I think what I observed in high school is just the lack of focus on these major events. Even taking an event like a Civil Rights Act, the lack of 2 days on it, 3 days on it, a week on it, just the decision making by high school teachers on these moments of events that were triggered by some of the events that happened maybe a mile down the road, was kind of eye-opening to me. But I've fortunately had friends, family who were part of the Birmingham Children's Crusades, who would be able to tell you and give me the actual understanding, people who worked in the churches, people who created these possibilities, to be able to get an actual education on, the events that transpired. But I think I was able to get a unique looking glass eye into how little kids from the other side of the track or were being kind of educated about that, because I was getting that education that was supposed to be the best because of its tax situation. And I think that I just kind of observed that going into college, that it's like, it's kind of like what Mr. Gabia was saying, the most kind of abundant source that a teacher can have with its students is trust. And I learned that I trusted my family in understanding that. But I think certain times I didn't have the trust with the teachers because I didn't feel like I was always getting the accurate information because of the town that I was being able to get a view of that not a lot of students did. So I was missing that trust that I think that I wanted. So if we open up a book in government class and I wasn't getting the information about the Children's Crusades that I thought that I was getting from since I was a kid, from my aunts, aunties, uncles, and family, that I had this trust with, had this understanding with, who I could see the experiences on their faces and experiences, and not getting that from the books that were kind of giving a classification from the legislation in the state. I took a step back as a student and had to evaluate how I was receiving my education and my learning. And that began my foyer into, researching, learning more about Black authors, Black writers who were creating reliable documentation at that time. So I had to really seek it myself. And I think that we don't get a lot of that push, whether it be 11th, 12th, or in college. That push to learn more about the accuracies of certain times and periods that affected our American history.
Thank you so much for that, Tim. And that also brings up a great additional element here that why we haven't outlined it in the agenda is just like the role of local property taxes, zoning, even like real estate values have such an outsized impact. But pivoting now to our next question, education can be a challenging political topic because it inevitably deals with issues of access amongst many others, but educational access to understand curricula content and why it is or is not relevant. Also access to understand the various approaches to pedagogy that may serve some communities while not serving others. What are some key areas of inquiry, Mr. Gavia, that you'd encourage people to pursue to get a better understanding of the education landscape in their community?
Heather, you asked some good questions. I believe the challenge in education as a political topic is that the greatest challenge is that people manipulate the facts for personal gain. And I believe it, I wholeheartedly believe it's personal gain. I'm not trying to benefit you unless it benefits me. So somewhere in there, I've got to have some kind of investment. And when you do that, then you create winners and losers. And education isn't about creating winners and losers. Education is about leveling a playing field so everybody's got a chance to gain, to live a better life. And the gain is not about dollars and cents. The gain is about quality of life. And that's the other thing about education. We seem to have lost our way about why are we here? What are we learning this for? Is it really about dollars and cents? Well, yeah, there is a reality to that. But overall, it's just about living an honest, decent, good life for the time that we have. But the answer to your question, to gain a better understanding of the educational landscape in the community, first, talk to your child if you got one. You want to find out what's going on in school, you talk to that kid who's in the school. Then, and look at their work. See what the assignments are. See how they're being assessed. See how they're being measured. See what other, because they're going to bring in examples of other students too. Find out how those other students are learning. The next step, get inside the classroom. If you don't have a child, a nephew, a niece, if you don't have someone in the school where you can kind of talk to them about what's going on in the school, then get into a school. Now it's kind of hard these days, particularly with the issue of COVID-19 and being in a school, but you can certainly still get to a teacher. You can call a teacher, you can schedule some time, maybe have some time after school or before school, maybe meet with the principal, but find somebody in that building that you can talk to. If you really want to understand what's really happening in the building, you got to get into the building. If you decide that you you want to take the route of going into a school board meeting, then go in prepared. And not just prepared to fight, but prepared to fix. So don't just go in there with accusations about, well, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. Go in there with proposals on how to fix those things or how to make those things better. Because whenever you go in for a fight, whenever you go in with your hands up and you're ready to wail, somebody's going to meet you with that same kind of force. Because nobody's going to stand down anymore, particularly those people who are most affected. So then all you've got is chaos and no gain. One thing about education now is that it's designed now. Education is no longer designed to give you information, because information is available at a touch of a button. All of us right now, we have access to a limited amount of education right in front of us at this very moment. But education now is teaching us, how do we use this information? And where else can we go to get the information? And then once we get it, how do we figure out what it means or what it doesn't mean? Because that's even just as important. So it's just on a totally different level than it's ever been before. And so therefore, it takes a concerted effort if you really want to make an impact on what they're learning and how they're, as well as how they're learning, to get to the grassroots, to be as diligent as possible, to be kind, and also to be kind. Because kindness is a very powerful tool. And you treat people with kindness and respect, more often than not, you're going to get the same in return, and you're going to be able to get things done.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to the final question, but there will still be room for any of our creatives to chime in. Once people have a fuller and more accurate view of the education issues looming large in their local communities, how should they tailor their civic engagement to make the most positive impact? And I know you've touched on this a little bit in your previous answer, so I do want to specify, how do they tailor their civic engagement to make the most positive impact, particularly in service of Black K-12 students?
Heather, I've experienced my experience in trying to improve the outcomes for students in school. My experience is that if you don't make it inclusive for all students, that if one student loses, we all lose. If we are, or if we target one group of students as in our effort to improve their outcomes, then what we're doing is that we are, first of all, we're putting a sign on their backs. And that happens a lot, because all of a sudden, these particular people are treated differently and given advantages, maybe because they're, we see them as being disadvantaged, so therefore we're going to give them a boost. But what about me? And so then you create that adversarial response, or that adversarial relationship. So in a building, you've got to be inclusive. You've got to take them all. Really, I think what it really matters, it starts at home. It has to be. It has to start with that father and his daughters, or that mother and her sons, or that grandmother and her grandchildren. It has to be in that home. And that's why we have to push it on an individual basis, not just inside the school, but in every aspect of our lives. My daughters, I did not, nor did my wife, leave it up to the schools to educate my child. We did it. And we made sure that they were educated so they could find out the information that they needed, that they could self-educate. That was our goal. So we didn't leave it up to somebody else to tell them what to learn or how to get the information. we made sure that we were involved in that. And that's where it has to start. That's where it has to start. And again, it has to be a collective issue. It has to be for all of us. Otherwise, if one of us lose, we will all lose. It's got to be a positive, authentic engagement. You can tell when somebody is out for personal gain and not really out for the betterment of other people. So you got to be honest about what you're doing, because it will show. You want to make an impact in K-12 education, pick up a book and read it to a child. Any child that will listen, you pick up a book, you could change a child's life. Because if that child, for that one moment, feels comforted, feels safe, feels happy, then they're going to go back and pick up a book because it made them feel that way. And all of a sudden, you didn't just give that child a fish, you taught that child how to fish, how to feed himself, how to educate themselves. That is really, in my opinion, what we really need to do. Now you won't get it on the 5 o'clock news. Your face won't be seen, or your words won't be written in the Washington Post or the New York Times. But what you will do is that you'll create a learner, and that learner will create a life, and that life will create memories, and what you'll do is you'll create history. Another thing, listen to educators. Educators have spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars, 5, 10, a lifetime in education, not just teaching, but learning. And that's another thing. Every time you teach, you learn. So if you can parlay what you've learned and what you've taught over time, then why wouldn't somebody listen to me? Why wouldn't someone heed what I have to say? Because quite honestly, I am the resident expert. I know what I'm talking about, because I've done this over and over again. I've failed over and over again. And if you keep doing something and you keep failing something, eventually you'll learn what to do and what not to do. So believe in an educator. Believe that we know what we're doing. Believe that we spent this $50, $60, $70,000 to spend 12, 13, 14 hours a day, trying to do the best we can to make somebody's life better. Believe that we know what we're doing.
Thank you so much. I do want to add, for folks who are tuning in, a good portion of our audience is based in New York City. And so I think there are some local ways to kind of like specify some of this. First of all, please support the educators here. There have been so many organizing efforts over the past year, especially, that specifically serves the amazing teachers who are working their behinds off. I'm not going to curse because Mr. Gavia is on the Zoom. Please support the United Federation of Teachers. If you know a union teacher or a union teacher organizer, follow them on Instagram, see what they're doing, go support them. They're not marching in the cold for nothing. Go march with them, see where you can show up, not just at protests, but also send those emails. All of the emails of the city councilors are publicly accessible. When we were organizing around education budgeting last summer, it was so easy just to copy and paste all of their emails, send one mass email, and send it every day. I guarantee you it's worth it. The other thing to know about New York City is that it's not just Department of Education funding that's going into public schools, and not all public schools get the same amount of funding. Not all public schools are built the same. We also have a massive transfer school system here in each state. These schools are addressed differently. Transfer schools in New York City are specifically for overaged, undercredited high schoolers who need specialized attention so that they can get their high school diplomas. These usually involve smaller classrooms. These usually involve educators who are specifically trained with additional culturally informed and trauma-informed pedagogy in order to meet the needs of these students. So if you are particularly moved to know about local transfer schools in your area, these schools oftentimes experience steeper budget slashes, and their students are oftentimes dealing with disproportionate issues that impact their ability to access educational resources, such as if you're 20 and you have a child at home, sometimes it's harder to get to class. So paying attention to the things that educators in those particular schools are saying that serve these students are going to be really, really important. And that's a way that you can make an impact in your own community. Last but not least, please know that the education framework of your city is not just made up by the things that your municipal body is paying for. For example, in New York City, we have a massive nonprofit infrastructure that comes in to essentially fill in a lot of the things that has been slashed out of education budgets by our Department of Education. A lot of field trips, arts and media education, even media literacy that impacts a young person's ability just to understand and read the news, research skills, STEM and STEAM access. A lot of those things are provided through nonprofits. And just because a nonprofit is classed as a charity doesn't mean that it's the best nonprofit in the world. So please also pay attention to how nonprofits pay their teaching artists. These are also educators. These are also working artists. Many of them are being paid $10.99. They're being paid not especially well. And when they pay their taxes in April, they're paying anywhere from 20 to 50% of their living expenses while paying New York City rent, while going to the local Family Dollar or Dollar Tree to make sure that their students have notebooks and pencils and paper because DOE decided to slash their supplies line. So please remember that education access in your community is not just the school building. It's not just property taxes. It's not just the annoying thing that comes out of your W-2s. It's also a labor issue. It's also access. And it is very much a municipal issue, and it is very much worth opening your emails and picking up your phone and bothering the people that you voted for. Before I close out, is there anything that anyone else would like to add?
I have one more thing to say, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
And that is encourage a child to be a teacher. We so desperately need teachers. People have been leaving the professions, and people have been leaving the professions in droves in the last few years. And this started back in the 1980s, and it's just accelerated. And now we've got schools that are closing because we don't have enough people there to teach them. And it's not going to come from, it's not going to come from Samsung or any other company, GM. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to require all of us to help nurture our future teachers, our future educators. We don't have a future without teachers, and we won't have teachers without you, because it's you who are going to get those young people to think about being in a classroom, and it's you're going to feed that ego that says being a teacher is a good thing. No, you won't make a lot of money. Let's be honest about this. No, you won't get any fame. No, you won't get a shoe contract. But and maybe you won't be paid what you're supposed to be paid, at least not monetarily. But what you do is change lives. And you create futures, and those things matter. And there are people who are doggone good at this. So I'm asking you, please, if you see a child or a young person, encourage them to think about teaching. Doggone it, you think about it. And when you can, maybe you don't need a degree to be a teacher. What you need is common sense, a strong sense of honesty, and the ability to reach and touch people. That's what it takes to be a teacher. So you know, I'm putting a plug in for my profession. We need us. We need more of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I can't think of a better way to end. So Kira, I will just invite you to close the recording whenever you would like to.